Hi there, this is Tasha from Tasha Quilts, and today I'm showing you my favorite method to make a quarter circle block, sometimes known as a drunkard's path, or also known as a drunkard's path block. You can make so many cool designs with a quarter circle block, including my blooming blades pattern. I will say there are many methods out there for sewing curves. I've tried quite a few, and this is the method that works the best for me. Give it a try, and if you don't like it, tweak it, go find somebody else's method out there. There are so many different ways, and I'm confident that you're gonna find the method that works best for you. But do it, because curves are so fun. Come to the curvy side. Let's talk templates. So to make curves, unless you're doing improv curves, you need a template. You can buy acrylic templates. There are sets out there. Certain quilt patterns sell the templates that go along with them, or you can use paper templates. I have only ever used paper templates up until this point. In this example, we're using the 6-inch free templates that I have listed in my shop. Once you download those, you're going to want to print those out at actual size. That's a setting in your printer when you're printing. You want it to be do not scale or actual size. You do not want fit to page. Actual size is what you want. After you've printed the templates, you're going to check the 1-inch block on the templates to make sure that it measures 1 inch, and you can also check the seam allowances to make sure that they measure 1/4 inch. Today we are just going to be using the quarter circle and the outer template. We are not going to be using the orange peel that's included. However, you can save this for a future day, because I know you're gonna love curves and you're gonna wanna create orange peels. I mean, look how good they look. When you look at the templates that I've provided, there's an extra 1/4 inch seam allowance indicated in gray. This extra seam allowance allows for a little bit of flexibility in case something funky happens, but it does mean you will need to trim every single block. If you feel confident in your skills, you can take off that extra gray line when you make your templates, but you'll need to be a lot more precise in your sewing. Despite making all of the curves I've made, I still do prefer to have that extra 1/4 inch and trim my blocks down. Okay, so first up, you're gonna cut out the templates on the line. I like to cut just outside the black line so you can still see the entire black line of the template. Next up, you have to decide, are you going to reinforce your templates or not? Now, if you're going to make just one block, you may not need to reinforce your templates, but if you're going to make more than one block, I strongly suggest reinforcing your templates. You can do this in many different ways. People use things such as cardboard. I've used cardstock, dollar store cutting boards, all kinds of things, but my favorite is acrylic plastic. I used to like to buy the extra thick, but I haven't been able to find it. So in today's video, and what I'm stuck using for now, is the regular thickness acrylic plastic. It gets the job done, but I just liked it a little bit thicker. So if you find the extra thick acrylic plastic, that is by far my favorite thing to purchase. I use Scotch tape to tape the paper templates to the acrylic plastic. Once I have both on there, I use scissors, not my fabric cutting scissors, and cut out the plastic. I do this very similar as I cut just outside the black line, so then hopefully your paper and your templates are the exact same size. I leave the paper attached to the plastic so that you can know what pattern and what shape this is for, because some patterns have the actual like shaped letters on the template. So it'll say like cut 6 of shape A. I then keep all of the templates on a paper plate in my closet. After just sewing a few quilts, I have amassed quite the collection. This is great because then if I want to make a shape or a design, I can print off the templates on paper, come over to my paper plate, see if I have one that matches up, and then I don't have to recreate or use more plastic. I already have a reinforced template ready to go. So now you've got your template cut out at actual size, you've got it reinforced if you're going to reinforce it, or you're just going to make one block and you're not going to reinforce it. Now it's time to cut your fabric. You can do this in 2 different ways, either by tracing and then cutting using your scissors and a rotary cutter, or just using a rotary cutter along the edge of your template. Or really, I mean, you can cut this any way that you deem fit, but those are the 2 that I would recommend. But the first step I do is I like to cut a strip of fabric as wide as the outer template. Our outer template is 6.75 inches because it has that extra 1/4 inch seam allowance. This way I can cut both the outer and the inner templates out of the same strip of fabric. If you cut a strip of fabric at 6.5, you won't be able to get any of the outer templates cut out of it. I also find that cutting strips of fabric makes it a lot easier to manage than just trying to willy-nilly cut them out of yardage. In addition, when you cut the strip, you now have two edges that are cut of the template, and you only need to worry about the curve and the long edge. After I have my strips of fabric cut, I use painter's tape on the back of the template and place it within the strip. So here you can see you've got the long side on one side and the short end on the other, and they line perfectly with the edges of our template. Now in this example, I'm going to show you how to trace. So because we have two edges already aligned with the fabric, you simply need to trace the curve and the edge. I use this using a standard generic Sharpie marker that I have laying around my sewing room. I don't do anything fancy here. Now when you remove the template, you see the two lines that you need to cut. You can use your ruler and a rotary cutter to cut the straight edge, and then you can use some scissors to cut the curve. I used this method to create 2 quilts when I first started because I was way too nervous to use the rotary cutter. I did both the balloon quilt and my first pinnacle pop using this method. I think I forgot to mention earlier, but you can use weights when you're doing this with addition to the tape. So as you'll see here, I'm using blue tape, attaching it to the fabric, and then you can choose to use washers as like pattern weight. So my favorite method is to take this template, use the rotary cutter, cut around the edges, and boom, you're done. I will tell you that in the beginning, yes, sometimes I nicked the template and cut through it and would need to create another one. No big deal. It saves a lot of time. When you trace, you have to trace and then cut. It's 2 steps versus this, you just lay and cut. But do what you're comfortable with. Give them both a go. Be very careful. Rotary blades are sharp. You know this. I'm not telling you anything new, but be careful. A couple of tips when you're cutting these things out. 1, before you go all crazy moving your fabric after you make your cuts, just gently pull on the fabric away from the template and then see if it comes away nicely. If it doesn't, use that rotary cutter to find the spots that you missed. 2, if you're using multiple layers of fabric, on occasion I will use Wonder Clips and clip the layers if I'm nervous about things shifting, and that keeps things together nicely. All right, we now have 2 shapes cut out of fabric. So our next step is to pin this together so we can sew it. Again, lots of methods used here. I like this method, but people also glue or even no pin methods, but this is Tasha's favorite method. So first, we have to find the middle of both of these templates so that we can line them up. So first, I like to do this with an iron. I fold them in half and press so that I have a nice crease. Because I'm using solids, I don't really need to pay attention to what's the right side and the wrong side. I really suggest that you fold, and when you're doing this, you do 1 right sides together, 1 wrong sides together. This creates little creases that nest together. So you can see here that I have 2 little divots in these pieces, and they sit right and nice on top of each other. This is great. You know exactly where the center is, and you know these 2 centers are aligned. So I get my 2 little centers, line them up, and put a pin in the top. I put a pin right in that middle crease. Then I find that I like to put a pin about 1 inch from the edge and 1 inch from the edge on both sides. So you just pull that piece over, line it up, stick a pin in it, and then I use a clip in the middle. So I just finesse that fabric so it lays nice and flat and clip a pin. Pin the middle, pin the edges, put your clips in. This is my favorite method. I have tried all pins. I tried all clips. I really, really, really strongly suggest a pin in the middle. To me, it is much more secure. And as long as you get that middle part to line up, everything else seems to work out pretty well for me. I also like leaving that little bit of space at the edge so I don't have to fiddle with it when it's under my machine. When I put it under my machine, I make sure it's all lined up and then I can sew. But I have found like having to get it aligned under my machine and then fiddle with the pin, it just didn't work for me. So again, I really encourage you to give it a go, give it a try, see what you can do. All right, so now we have our block that's all nice and pinned and clipped together. Now we're heading to the sewing machine. This is sewing like anything else you've ever sewn. You're just gonna do a nice 1/4 inch. And you're only worried about what's right under your needle and what's in front of your needle. You're not worried about whatever nonsense is happening over to the left. You're focused on what's under your needle. So sew right along with a 1/4 inch. And if you see any creases, stop. Okay, like if you, oh gosh, this fabric's feeling funky. As the needle is down in your fabric, put your presser foot up and then you can tug at the fabric, pulling it back. When you do this, you can straighten out any of the potential creases. Put your presser foot back down and keep on sewing. Go slowly, you'll be fine. Go, go, go. You've done this thousands of times. If the fabric does kind of fold over and you get a pleat, which I did plenty of in the beginning, you have a couple of options here. One, you can leave it. I left it in my early quilts, and I still leave it to this day, unless I'm doing something really particular, a wall hanging, something like special. But on a quilt like the one behind me, I would just leave it. Once it's quilted and washed and you get that crinkle, they're very hard to notice. But if you're a perfectionist and that pleat's gonna bother you, you can just seam rip a couple stitches where the pleat is, straighten it out, press it if you've got to, sew it again. You don't need to go crazy and seam rip the whole thing. Or, seam rip as much as you need to be able to finagle that fabric to get it nice and flat, and then resew. Now, after lots of practice, I haven't had a pleat in quite a while. This truly is something that once you get better at it, as long as you're paying attention, it becomes second nature to just worry about what's in front of your needle and clean it up. All right, you've sewn a curved block. Easy peasy lemon squeezy, right? There's really not much to it. Now it's time to press and trim. So just like anything else, take it to our machine, press, not iron. Do as I say, not as I do, and press that out towards the outside. Now trimming. This is a tricky part, but not really. Stay with me. So we're not going to trim the inner part of this block. We're only going to trim that outer part where we had that extra gray on the template. The goal is to have 1/4 of an inch remaining at the edges of the outer template, so that when you sew it to the next block, that it lines up nicely and hits that inner template piece. If for some reason that inner template piece is really, really wonky and you need to trim it up, trim as little as you can. I try really hard never to touch the inner template piece, but if you have to, do what you have to do. But again, our goal is to end up with a 6.5 inch block with 1/4 inches on either edge. Because we have that extra 1/4 of an inch on this template, unless you chose to trim it off, you will have to trim each block. All of my patterns and templates have that extra 1/4 of an inch, but you could easily, when you're making your templates, if you feel like you're a pro and want to give it a go, you could just slice it right off so you don't have to deal with it. All right, your first 6.5 inch unfinished, 6 inch finished 1/4 circle block is complete. Easy peasy, but I will warn you that curves do become addictive the more you do them. So be careful out there. And to be honest with you, I still prefer curved blocks over flying geese any day of the week. If you have any questions or run into any problems when you're doing your curved block, comment below or find me out there on the internet and I'll be happy to help. Are you going to give this a try? Will you do it the same? Will you do it different? Do you have another method that's your favorite method to do curves? Tell me all the things. Like I said, I'm quilt obsessed. I want to hear it. Give me all your details. Did I miss a step? Is something confusing? Let me know. I have a blog post dedicated for tips on sewing curves that you can find at tashaquilts.com tips-4-curves right here at the bottom. You can see that. And I hope you find some time for yourself. Okay, bye.